Ellie, are we streaming live on Facebook?
We are.
Uh-oh.
Did we
Can't talk about the
get
kids
did
anymore.
we get any one of Mary's many rants?
I don't think we did.
I think she just ended rant number 3 when we
Hey.
went live. Gosh. Well, we might get another iteration of the
I'll
rant.
behave now.
And Mary is in early because she's going to give us a history of the flag, how Betsy Ross sewed it. She cut, she had the deal where she just one scissor cut for the 5-pointed star, showed George she did that on this day, 1776.
That's it. You got it, Todd. I can.
The program's over.
Program's over. That's Flag Day. Oh, Sean, do you know what you could do? One thing I forgot to do. Can you bring up the photo that maybe we could share at some point before we bring everybody in the Zoom room of the monument on Flagstaff Hill in Shenley Park? Pittsburgh claims to be the birth of Flag Day. Because for a couple reasons, but the main reason is I think the National American Flag Association was founded in Pittsburgh in like the 1880s.
And because Betsy Ross traveled to Pittsburgh and did it there.
You know what? She probably did. She probably did.
Covered wagon and all, yeah.
Right. I don't have all the details, but I think it was covered wagon, came to Pittsburgh, put up a flagpole at Fort Pitt, declared Flag Day. And but they did dedicate a monument to the American flag, Sean. You probably see it, and maybe you could get a shot of the plaque too on it. Yeah. And I think that's why Flagstaff Hill is a popular park here in Pittsburgh, right near the universities, and it's because of Flag Day. Because of Flag Day.
Okay. Yes. Sometimes I'll mention certain places, and I look them up because I don't know the area.
I'm gonna start the.
Here we go.
Over hill, over hill, we have hit the dusty trail, and those caissons go rolling along. Forward march, right about! Hear those wagon soldiers shout, while those caissons go rolling along. For it's high, high me in the field of artillery, full of good numbers out and strong. And wherever we go, you will always know that those caissons are rolling along.
Happy U.S. Army birthday, everybody, and happy Flag Day. I am Todd, and this is the VBC Happy Hour, this June 14th, 2021. It is the 246th birthday of the United States Army, and it is also Flag Day. It is the day that Betsy Ross had George Washington, Benjamin Franklin, Thomas Jefferson over at her house, and they all did this amazing sewing circle. You had all the founding fathers sewing the American flag, and they did it on this day. I'm guessing it was 1776. Mary Klepper may take issue with that version of history, but that's the version I'm sticking with, and I like it a lot. So we're going to talk. Mary's going to teach us a little bit about the history of Flag Day. We're also going to, of course, celebrate and have our Army veterans share some stories. And then we also have two guests, Lee Wright and Carrie Lund. Hi, Lee. Thank you for joining us. And I know you've got to scoot, so we'll get you on soon. But I want first to Mark Sparadigliosi. Where's Mark Sparadigliosi? There he is. Mark, you sent me a wonderful presentation, very well prepared, very well thought out, about why the Army is the best branch of service. And for those of you who aren't familiar with the United States Army, it is our largest branch of service by far. It is about, and I'm showing you this just so you get this sense of the size of the Army. The Army is about, in terms of personnel, the Army is almost as large as all the other branches combined. If you're just dealing with active duty, the Army makes up about 1/3 of the United States Armed Forces. And you can see the number here, 471,000 out of, so that's about 1/3 of 1.35 million total active duty. But when you throw in the Army National Guard and the U.S. Army Reserve, you really do get, it's just shy, maybe 48% or so of armed forces are in the Army. And Mark Sparadigliosi, you had the option of joining other branches of service, but you had the good sense of turning those options down and joining the Army. Why is that?
Well, number one, there's a couple of things that I just like to preface this with, Todd, as we start talking. The everybody in the world has a big brother or a big sister that you look up to. And the reason that you look up to them is because they were born before you. They have more years on the earth. We in the Army have more time in the latrine line than some of the other services have total. So, I had the option as I was I was first drafted, and I had the option as I was standing in my skivvies in Fort Wayne in downtown Detroit of going into the Army or a Marine Corps. So they asked if there were any volunteers. There was nary a one, Todd. Nobody anywhere was going to volunteer. And that's with all due respect to Marines, because I deeply respect those guys. But anyways, when nobody volunteered, they needed a certain number of people, so they had us in lines. And actually, the first formation I ever stood in my life was in Fort Wayne, and they went down the line and they said, "You're in the Army, you're in the Marines, you're in the Army, you're in the Marines," and I happened to be there. So the big brother aspect and all of that is part of this. So,
Can you imagine being drafted into the Marine Corps? Oh my gosh. Oh boy. I mean, it's one thing to volunteer like Brad Washabaugh here, and it's another thing to be drafted into it. Whew, man, I tell you. So let's get on with what makes the Army the best. Oh, I was going to say before we get on to that, I think the Army is the best for anybody who likes to eat out of cans.
Yes.
Very good. Very good. The Army is free, or out of a bag, maybe a plastic bag, if you're a later generation Army. It's good if you like sleeping in the dirt. Great branch of service if you like sleeping in the dirt. Great branch of service if you like firing big guns and then seeing explosions. And great branch of service, I understand, if you like standing out in formation in the rain without any clear idea of why for a long time. That's why I would join the Army. But you have some other reasons to join. Best food to go.
Absolutely. They talk about McDonald's and all that good Air Force grub that you had. Take a look at this. I mean, you have a chance to eat not only sea rations out of doors, no doubt, but you have the chance to have the MREs if you're a young guy, like some of the young guys that we have on here. So I was just astounded by the fact that we had that best food in the world.
Absolutely.
And then if you didn't like dining in the out of doors and having it al fresco, you could eat in these quiet, remote dining rooms that had only the best utilities and utensils that you could do. You could see that all the happiness that floats in this Army mess hall as we take a look down that line there. And Todd, this all just came to me whenever you asked us why it was better, and I needed to express this to you.
And I have to say, this looks like this. In all seriousness, this looks like a special dinner, maybe Thanksgiving dinner, maybe, I don't know.
Oh yeah, look at all the asparagus and green beans on there. It's health food. Right. And then you have free air travel worldwide. I think that I recognize that one guy because I was pushing him as he was jumping out there of the UE, the 39, except that's not a first cav helicopter, so I can't say it was. But then if you didn't like traveling in small groups, we did have the Chinook, which would allow you up to 50 passengers if you wanted, and only the finest webbing seats in the world and the bumpiest landings that you could ever expect.
And they'll take you to places that tourists don't normally go to.
Oh, that's if you want to flip a slide there, maybe we could find one at some point. Well, this particular one, I'm sorry, this is free ground transportation also. If you didn't like the comfort of the tank, because you only got a few members in that tank as they were doing that, and they did get a little noisier than the APC that is on the right. And the armored personnel carrier left you take some of your good friends with you, and you'd be able to, you see that you are able to salute while in an APC. If you look at the guy coming out of the hatch, but the guy in the tank, all they're doing is just clapping. If you look at the foreground there.
And I see that we have a former APC driver with us tonight, Harry Van Riper, who will hopefully tell us a little bit about driving one of those things in Vietnam.
And then once again, this is the vacations to the exotic lands. I mean, where else could you go see exotic jungles and just travel a few hundred miles south and be in a resort area that is on the river and have boat transportation. This also is part of that free transportation that you get. And then vacations on the beach. The beach on the left, we saw a great presentation on D-Day, and that you don't see that very often. The one on the right, believe it or not, is Cameron Bay. I can't see the water there at all.
That's Cameron Bay. See, I would never have guessed that.
No, that's what whenever I pulled the picture up online, that's what it said.
It must be. But yeah.
It's online, Todd, so it has to be true.
Oh, it's on the internet. It's definitely true.
Yeah. And then you get free haircuts. I mean, I just don't know. Look, I mean, mine has never really grown back since then. But the guy on the left looks like it hurts to have his haircut. And the guy on the right knows that it hurts.
It hurts at least on the inside, I think.
You have free workout facilities. Once again, you can do it in the outdoors. You can do it in the indoors. And if you choose and opt to do it in the indoors, you have your own personal trainer there with you that can instruct you whether or not you're doing that push-up number 723 because you called your rifle by the wrong name. And he's going to help you get through all of that.
And keep in mind, folks, that a lot of people pay for personal trainers. You're getting paid to have a personal trainer like that.
What could be any better, Todd? And then you have this free, comfortable lodging that you can either opt to have it assembled for you on the left as a cot, or number on the right, you can do it yourself with a good friend. He better be a good friend, and you can spend some time in the great outdoors.
If they're not a good friend before, they will be after.
And then you have free medical care. Who needs the American or the Affordable Care Act? You have all of this availability, not only to have the shots and all the inoculations for free. There's free dental care and only the cleanest of all facilities and hygiene that you have there. You can see in the top and bottom, they're both taking a look at the teeth and making sure that you have them.
And you can see that this patient is very happy and he's comfortable getting his teeth worked on by an expert dentist like Ken Rozicki, who I think will probably be joining us tonight. I have to point out, though, this guy says Navy. This says Navy right here.
Well, I'm sorry, but sometimes, I didn't catch that one, Todd. But the Navy is a younger brother, so we want to make sure that we take good care of them. Actually, the Army was created before this great country that we live in was created.
Yes, and is the oldest branch of service. Camping and nature hikes.
Once again, you can see it there for yourself, a place to dry your boots, a place to hang your canteen and your medical helmet for the doctors in the group here tonight. And then, you can take those nice nature trail walks there if you see them on the right. You have to carry a little bit of extra equipment with you, but it becomes so comforting to do that. And you know that your friends are right there with you. Once again, the personal trainer is dead center in the picture. They have free clothes. One size fits all. I mean, they don't measure anything. I had a pair of boots like that in Vietnam that I had to take 2 steps to get started in. They were so big for
me. Great. And then that's it. I believe that's it. Well, thank you. I tell you, if you haven't sold people on that now, Mark, I think they'll just never get it.
I just hope that we can get rid of the draft, because all of the people will now be flocking there now that the story is out.
The story is out that the way to the best life is the Army life. Thank you, Mark. And we're going to come back to Mark and hear more of his story. We have some wonderful photos. And here's a little fast fact for you. Mark's rank, his departing rank in the Army, no longer exists. It no longer exists. All right. So before we get to our stories, I do want to welcome Lee Wright. Lee, thank you so much for joining us. And Carrie Lund. They are the founders of this really, I have to say, a remarkable nonprofit. And I did ask them to come on because I'm just so taken with their project. It's called The Pursuit of History. And me being a historian and liking history, loving history, I was very much taken with their mission, which is to kind of bring history to, interested, curious adults who don't want to slog through. Forgive me, I am a scholar, but I will say this, don't want to slog through kind of boring scholarship that gets lost in the forest and they don't see the trees. Maybe that's Lee, Carrie, how would you characterize your mission?
Well, Todd, I think that's a good way to explain it. And thank you for being our guest. The other evening, we really enjoyed you being part of our Thursday night discussion series with noted authors and historians. So Carrie and I co-founded The Pursuit of History to address adults who may have later in life developed an interest in history, perhaps by looking around and thinking, maybe we've been through some of these things before. What could we learn? And it's an organization that brings together people from all walks of life. And in the past, we've done in-person events. In fact, last year in late March, we were scheduled to have more than 550 people in downtown Boston at a great location right across from the old Granary Burying Ground for all-day session, all-day event, dozens and dozens of sessions. We had people flying in from all over. Well, something intervened, something historic intervened. And as a result, we did two things. One is that we created a weekly series of discussions, and that's what you were a part of the other evening. So every Thursday night at 8 p.m. Eastern, we talked to a noted historian or author. And then on August 1st of last year, we did something called America's Summer Road Trip, because people weren't hitting the road. And we know that people who love history love getting in a car, going out, seeing America's historic sites. So we went to 12 historic sites from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. and had tours and live interviews. This year, on July 10, we are taking kind of both of those and combining them and making them something part of History Camp America. It's our first nationwide event, nationwide History Camp event, and we'll have several dozen sessions. We'll have behind the scenes tours of historic sites, and it's really going to be a bunch of fun. This is an event that people have to register for, and we have had several hundred people from across the country do that already. Carrie, do you want to join in here in some of the things that people will see and hear on the 10th?
Sure. We have 7. We'll actually have a few more than 7, but we have so far 7 historic sites announced. We'll have 25 sessions or more from all sorts of different people involved in history. So there's a lot of different topics to suit different interests. Just to give you an idea of historic sites, we have Buckman Tavern in Lexington Green from the Revolutionary War. We have the Buffalo Soldiers Museum in Houston. We have the Calvin Coolidge birthplace and the Lincoln Home and several more. And we also have a coupon code for you guys. If you are interested, you can use Veterans Breakfast 21, and that will get you $5 off of your admission. And the good thing, since this is virtual, you just need one registration for your whole family if you're all watching together. So it's a good deal. And we have a box of history stuff that we have curated that is an option when you register, and it is stuff that people who love history will really enjoy. We've got a hat, we've got a t-shirt, and a glass with the Declaration of Independence etched on it and things like that. And you can see more of that at the website at historycamp.org. You can find all the information.
And I do highly recommend that people go to thepursuitofhistory.org or historycamp.org. And just start clicking around. That's what I did. And man, like, for example, your, what did you call it? History Tour of America last summer? Summer History Tour?
America's Summer Road Trip.
America's Summer Road Trip. That is so fascinating. I mean, you could spend a weekend just hanging out, watching these really interesting on-site interviews at these historic locations. We have these park rangers and tour guides who know the ins and outs of the place where they are. really fantastic. I mean, and it's the kind of thing where, like for me, I will see something, I'll watch that, and then I'll realize I want to go there, and I'll put that on my to-go list. So a lot of these videos, or I guess all of your videos from past events, are available now on the website, correct?
They are. So all of the tours from America's Summer Road Trip, all of our weekly sessions are available online also. People can find both those at historycamp.org. A couple things to note. One about America's Summer Road Trip, and the other about what we have coming up on July 10th. So last year when we did that, at each of those sites, people go behind the scenes. They go to some place that they wouldn't be able to see even if they were there in person, and they do it with a guide. This year with History Camp America on July 10, one of the sessions, and it's so appropriate we're talking about this today, one of the sessions includes a guided tour of Washington in Cambridge, including George Washington taking command of the Army. And it's a great tour. John Bell, some people may know, he writes Boston 1775. John and I went out, and we went from Sudbury to Framingham. We went into Cambridge, and we ended up late at night, so appropriate, on Dorchester Heights at the monument, looking over where the cannons were placed. And so that tour is one of the events that people will see on July 10th.
That's so cool. So you could register for the July 10th event at the website, thepursuitofhistory.org or historycamp.org. And even if you don't participate in July 10th, you go and click around, watch a video, watch a great little conversation by a historian like Todd, who's on there from a couple weeks ago. It's really fascinating collection. Somebody said way back when, and I think it's so true, that war is too important to leave to the generals. And I think there's a corollary to that, in that history is too important to leave to the scholars. Scholars play an essential role in our understanding of history, but it's not the only role, and it's not the last word. I think that what you're doing, Lee and Carrie, are bringing, history to kind of smart, educated, interested people who want to learn more but don't want to slog through the tedium of professional scholarship. It's a real service. Thank you.
Well, thank you. And this is such a great organization. We wanted to offer folks an opportunity. And Todd, I'm not quite sure how you're doing it in terms of drawing or whatever it is, but one of the things that one of the sponsors of this year's History Camp put together is this poster, which has more than 100 posters from World War II from the home front. It's a collection that we put together and printed up. It's really beautifully done. No one had done this before. We thought it would be a great thing for people who love history. And let us know, Todd, however you do this, this drawing, this participation, we will send off a poster to the person that you select.
I already know who should be selected. It should be Mary Klepper for the wonderful presentation she's going to do on Flag Day. Thank you so much. I asked her to do a presentation. She said, no, I really don't have time. I'm too busy. And I said, come on, Mary, how busy can you possibly be? And she came up with it. Ken Rozicki says, before you leave, Lee, Ken Rozicki says you have an interesting piece of furniture behind you. What is it?
This is a Victrola. I think that's the one he's thinking of, isn't it?
Yeah.
So this was actually in the family, and it's in excellent shape. And one of the things I love about it, it does make quite a bit of noise. One of the things I love about it is on the plate here, there are also the Chinese characters, because that was apparently sold in China. And one little curiosity here, we all know the image, right? His master's voice, right? So
Yep.
That image was originally painted with a cylinder. The artist could not sell the image to manufacturers of cylinder players, and redid the image and sold it to Edison.
Isn't that great?
So
And you know, Larry Googans is old enough to remember Victrola. He probably still has one in his living room. So I think this is a great Mary Klepper, you have a Victrola. And Jim Roberts too.
There you go.
Yeah, I had one. My dad has it. It's in his house, but it has my favorite record on it, the William Tell Overture.
Oh, great. Oh my gosh.
But
That's
it
so
still
neat.
works. It's my wife's. It still works.
It still works. See,
Yeah.
I was making a joke about how old Larry is, and inadvertently,
Don't
it's no
joke.
joke. No
Don't
joke.
joke.
Well,
My
thank you.
parents had one, Todd, and when the record player stopped working, my father turned it into a desk. It was a beautiful piece of furniture, but the guts were taken out of it.
How neat. That's neat. So, okay, that's like the time I gave a lecture on the jazz singer, the first talkie, or one of the first talkie, the first big talkie. And I opened up the lecture saying, like, it was in 1927. Does anybody remember seeing it? And like 7 hands went up. And I realized, oh man, I shouldn't joke about that kind of stuff. Lee, Carrie, thank you so much.
thank you.
I hope to see you again soon. And I'll be on the pursuitofhistory.org in my spare time. All right.
Great. Thanks very much, Tom.
All right. Take
Great
care.
organization. We'll see you.
See ya.
Goodbye.
I know they have a very busy month coming up, and I know they have a lot to do. Mary Klepper, thank you for joining us and giving us a little bit of history. Flag Day is one of those days. It's one of those peripheral American holidays. I'm sure there are millions of Americans who are going through the day without knowing or being aware that it is Flag Day, let alone what Flag Day is.
Yeah.
I live in Pittsburgh, and we claim to be the birthplace of Flag Day, I think for a couple different reasons. But I would love you to tell us all about Betsy Ross and how she sewed the first American flag.
Sure. I do want to let everybody know, though, Todd didn't ask me. He basically, said, oh, Mary's doing this. And I was like, I am? Okay. So
Voluntold.
that's how he does, doesn't he, Sean? All right. So I need to do my share screen, right?
Yep.
Okay. And grab my presentation. Oops. Let me get there. There we go. And from the beginning. All right. So there's my front page.
We don't see it.
You don't see it. So what I do?
No.
All right, hold on a second. Whoops, go back. Zoom.
There we go.
See it now? Okay.
That's
all right.
it. Yep.
Yep. Okay, good. All right, cool. So this is my presentation for Flag Day 2021, and these are 2 great photos from 2013. These are U.S. Army cadets being sworn in, and we had the ceremony at Oriole Park at Camden Yards 2013. And it was just fantastic because Fort Meade's right down the road. We get a lot of re-upping ceremonies and everything. I usually do the tours for the groups, and I'm one of the tour guides there. So I just thought that would make a great cover with the Army's birthday as well. So, all right, so let's get started. Between 1775 and 1949, when President Truman is going to officially declare June 14th as Flag Day, it's a story as great as the Republic itself, okay? And our flag has survived battles, it's inspired songs, and it's evolved in response to the growth of the country, both literally and figuratively. So our first flag here that I want to show is 1775. American ships in New England waters would fly this Liberty Tree flag. And I apologize, some of them might not be as crystal clear. It's because when I blew them up so you'd be able to see them, they kind of lost their clarity a little bit. Here's another one, 1775, the Continental Navy using this flag with that warning, don't tread on me. And then we all know these guys, the Sons of Liberty, Samuel Adams and the Tea Party gang, this was their flag. This flag is one of my favorites, January 1st, 1776. This was displayed on Prospect Hill. George Washington had ordered a flag to go up the mast of a 76-foot schooner mast that was placed on top of Prospect Hill. So you can see it's got the 13 alternating red and white stripes, but it has the Union Jack in the corner. Well, this wasn't sanctioned by Congress, but it was one that Washington and other people liked. Why? People might think it's weird to see the Union Jack in the corner, but you have to remember, we were fighting for respect and representation, not necessarily independence. And so this was really a show of loyalty to the crown you know, and it was very appropriate at the time.
It
Now-
was like the last olive branch. I mean, the last,
Right,
you know, like,
exactly. That's
let's
how I
not
look at
do
it.
this. Let's
Let's
not do this.
We
Right.
just want taxation without
Right.
representation. No, we don't want, right? The best part of this flag, I think, is the exact same day, a speech by King George was circulating in the Boston newspapers. And so when loyalists saw this flag, they're like, oh, great, they're going to surrender. And so George Washington, 3 days later on the 4th, he writes a letter, and I have to read this quote because it's typical George Washington. We gave great joy without knowing or intending it. It was received at Boston as a token of the deep impression the speech had made upon us, and as a signal of submission. By this time, I presume, they begin to think it strange that we have not made a formal surrender of our lines. To me, that is classic Washington if you have ever read his writings. So this is the flag that Betsy Ross sewed, 1776 in May. Break it to everybody. Big time myth buster. I totally should have my own show for this. She did not sew it. She certainly didn't sew it that day. This is her grandson. He has spread this tradition, other relatives starting to spread this tradition. And the reason that historians are like, that didn't happen is because there's literally no mention in any records. There's no documentations. There's no receipts, no nothing, okay? The only thing that we are fairly certain she had to do was that when George Washington came to her, she suggested, hey, George, make it 5 stars, 5 pointed stars instead of 6. It'll be cheaper and faster. Literally her only contribution, okay, to this flag. Now, she was a flag maker, and she did make flags during the Revolution and for the next 50 years. But most historians are going to agree that Francis Hopkins, who was a member of the Continental Congress, he designed most of the elements of the Great Seal of the United States, and he's the one that's going to come up with the design for the flag. So people always ask me on tour, they're like, how did this even get started? Well, I liken this to Longfellow's Paul Revere's Ride. It happens 100 years later, you know, nobody's even alive that was there. And it's a great story, and it's meant to stir up American pride, you know, for something that's going on. Well, in that case, the Civil War is getting ready to happen. We're trying to drum up support of the Union, right? In this case, 100 years after 1776, what could possibly be happening? Oh, right, the Centennial Exposition, which is happening where? In Philadelphia, okay? Also, I think at this time, young girls, you know, young women, they need a role model, and they're looking for heroines to show us that women had taken part in the American Revolution and in the shaping of our country's history. So it's a great myth. It's just, I'm sorry to debunk it if anybody really thought it was so. Hopefully I'm not traumatizing any kids that might be watching. But Betsy Ross, again, she was just one of many flag makers in Philadelphia. Rebecca Young, she has been, there is historical documentation. She made and designed the Grand Union flag that I mentioned earlier, the one that flew at Prospect Hill. All right, remember that name, Rebecca Young. She's going to make, her daughter will make an appearance later. So even though this flag is flying, there is still no standard. So here's like another example of a 13-star flag. These flag makers would just make them, you know, however they wanted.
So they didn't have to be in a circle.
No, they can just be willy-nilly however they wanted.
Right.
Yep. Obviously not a flag. This is a painting by Edward Moran in 1898, but this is a big deal. February 14th, 1778. This is the first recognition of the American flag by a foreign government. Huge deal. That is the Continental Navy ship Ranger, led by John Paul Jones, or commanded by John Paul Jones. And he's receiving the French salute in, I think it's pronounced Quiberon Bay in France. I don't speak French, so I don't know. But anyway, so this is a cool story there, I think. Big deal to have that first one. I wanted to throw in some local history for us. For me, this is Maryland. This is the Cowpens flag. This was first probably taken into battle in 1777, but we know for certain it went into battle in 1781, the Battle of Cowpens, South Carolina. And this flag today hangs in the Maryland State House. And we actually have roads around here named Cowpens, and I guarantee you Marylanders have no idea why it has such a bizarre name. But I'm gonna throw in some Pennsylvania lore for you too. That is the Brandywine flag carried in by the 7th Regiment, Pennsylvania Regiment at the Battle of Brandywine. And that flag is at Independence Historic Park in Philadelphia. And it's a militia company's flag, not a Continental Army flag, and not a flag of Washington's army. So today, 1777, they are going to set forth the rules, the Continental Congress, And I'll read you, it says, resolved that the flag of the United States be made of 13 stripes, alternate red and white, that the union be 13 stars, white in a blue field, representing a new constellation. I love that, a new constellation. Such perfect language we had back then, right? Does anybody recognize this flag? This is the John Paul Jones flag, also known as the Serapis flag, also known as the Franklin flag. 1779, his ship, John Paul Jones's ship, the Bonhomme Richard, is sunk, but he captures the Serapis, but there's no US ensign at the top. He sailed into a neutral Dutch port. The Brits are like, he's a pirate, arrest him. But everybody was kind of like, okay, wait a minute. So they make an ensign real quick, hoist it at the mast. The Dutch write it in the thing, draw a sketch of it. They know what the flag is sort of supposed to look like, and they count as this counts for that. This Franklin flag is actually recognized by the US Army as the official flag of the 111th Infantry Regiment. They're known as the Associators because Ben Franklin founded them in 1747. So I think that's kind of a cool flag. I like it. Right? Yeah, I like it. All right, this is my flag, the 1795. This is 15 stars and 15 stripes. We've got the 13 original colonies. We've now added Kentucky and Vermont. Okay, 15 stars and 15 stripes. Also known as the Fort McHenry flag. Okay, that's going to come back in a second. 1803, we've got this really cool flag. This is the Indian Peace flag. We've doubled the size of the country with the purchase of the Louisiana Purchase, right? And Lewis and Clark are going out. And what they do is they send them out with small tokens of affection and let's call it bribery, right? And this flag to take to the tribal nations that we're going to meet, hopefully trade for horses and help along the way, that sort of thing. But check this out. This is one of those flags. This is from 1933. And these gentlemen here on the left, this is these two men left and center. These are Chippewa Cree men. This is Loud Thunder on the left, and this is Frenchman in the center. And this is a Montana politician and Native American advocate, Frank Linderman. But hey, look how big the flag is, but look how thin it is. You can actually see his body, right? Through it. But isn't that a great picture? They think like 5 or 6 of these flags still exist today. How cool would that be to see one of those? All right. So I know Todd likes to give me a hard time being from Baltimore, but hey, I love this city, right? Guys, the British and the Canadians, they've come to DC, they've burnt it to the ground, right? We all know the story, saving the George Washington painting. But George Armistead, he's in charge of Fort McHenry, okay? And he is going to go to a flag maker right here in Baltimore. Her name is Mary Young Pickersgill. That's Rebecca Young's daughter. And he goes to her and he says, I want you to make me a flag so big, the British will have no trouble seeing it, all right? So for weeks, she, her daughter, I think a couple nieces, there's an African-American woman. We're not sure if she was enslaved or an indentured servant, but she's going to help sew this flag. It's huge. It spreads out through the whole house. She also flies a smaller storm flag. This flag is 40 by 32 feet. It is huge. All right. British, they're sailing up into the Baltimore Harbor. All right. They're about a mile or so out. There's a lawyer on board. He has been sent to those ships to negotiate a prisoner of war release, Dr. Beans. He is successful. He's going to get him off the boat. But the British are like, no. Sorry, Francis, you've heard too much of our plans. So all through the night, Francis Scott Key is going to watch the rockets' red glare, the bombs bursting in air, right? The next morning, he is going to look through a spyglass, see the flag still there. He will turn to Dr. Beans, huzzay, we have won. All right, he sits down and he writes a poem. And it is called The Defense of Fort McHenry. But if you notice, there's no C in the Mick right there, right? The Defense of Fort McHenry. When he writes this song, he's thinking of the British drinking song, Anacreon into Heaven, and he's putting it to the tune. And it eventually, it literally spreads across the country, becomes extremely popular. And by 1931, it's our national anthem. So Baltimore held the line, all right? DC burned, Baltimore did not. This is that flag. Fort McHenry, foolish people. They let me come every year, grab the flag, and I bring it to the Orioles. This is me over top, telling out the orders when to drop it. My two friends down here at the bottom, they just drape it to the wall so it doesn't blow away in our winds. And then when it's all done, we roll it up real quick, fold it in a bag, and then we sit up there and we toast beers to the friends we've lost in the previous years, my previous flag crew. Yeah. So we didn't get to do that this year because of COVID or last year. So here's to 2022. All right. So 1837, we've been adding states to the Union. This is called the Great Star Flag, never adopted by the Continental Congress, but it was an idea by Captain Samuel Chester Reed of the Navy, and he likes it because it'll be easier to add the stars than keep moving it around. But it's going to fall out of favor after the Civil War when we really start expanding and adding a bunch of a bunch of states. This flag is important. Why? 1861, we've added Kansas. But what's happening in 1861? The states are starting to secede from the Union. And Abraham Lincoln says, nope, you leave every one of those stars up. He encourages that even though the states are starting to secede and the first Confederate flag is adopted in Montgomery, Alabama. Big deal. All right, so this is the Fort Sumter flag. All right, so this flag is flying in the Charleston Harbor. April 9th, 1861, the war is going to break out. On April 14th, General Beauregard lets Anderson bring down the flag. The Union, I'm going to say we have lost the fort. But 4 years later, victorious, he comes back and he raises that same flag up. The war is over. We have preserved the Union. And it just so happens that today in 2019, I was at Fort Sumter. This turned up in my memories on Facebook today. I took this picture. I love our flag. You can see where it is, just like in the previous slide. And then they've put the, a sort of a thing over top of it to protect it, but to show you how it really looked before it was damaged in battle. Pretty cool.
That Major Anderson brought the flag up north. This thing toured up north, like every northern city in the early weeks of the Civil War, and it really
drum up that pride.
Drummed up kind of war fever, and also I think it was used for fundraising.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah, it's like the early version of war bonds.
Yep.
Seriously, right? And it really was to drum it up. This next photo, I love this story. I don't know if anybody's ever heard this story. You may have. This is William Carney. He was born into slavery in Virginia, but he sought his freedom in the North. And in 1863, he joined the famed 54th Massachusetts, right? Glory, the movie Glory with Denzel Washington. Oh, I love Denzel. Okay. So he just a few months later, he finds himself at Fort Wagner. And there's about 30% Union casualties. It's an absolutely devastating loss for the Union. And one of those men that's killed near Carney is the flag bearer. And as he sees his friend get shot, Carney grabs up the flag. He refuses to let it touch the ground. And he's shot in the leg. He gets shot in the leg, but he still doesn't drop the flag. And so instead of retreating, he keeps marching to the fort with his regiment, right? And it's terrible. The battle is terrible. So the Union starts retreating back. And as they're retreating, Carney takes a bullet to the chest. He takes one to the arm and he takes one to the leg again. Okay. And somebody offers to take it from him when a bullet grazes his head. But that guy is not with the 54th. And he says, nope, this is our flag. A member of the 54th should carry it. So he makes it all the way back to his unit. He passes the flag on just as he passes out. But he says, I did my duty, boys. I didn't let the flag touch the ground. All right. You'll see this if you're on Facebook a lot, you see this circulating that happened at Fort Sumter. It didn't. It happened at Fort Wagner. But miraculously, William Carney recovered, became a mail carrier in Washington. But here he is posing with his flag. You can see the cane there, right, that he's holding on to. And in 1900, at age 60, he received the Medal of Honor for his actions. And he was the first living African-American to be awarded this honor. And he became a symbol of pride for U.S. Black troops for generations. I think that's such a great story.
Great story.
Yeah. This is the Centennial flag. I don't think you guys could have guessed that at all. Yeah. I like the extra stars. I think it's cool. What happened to that flag? I'll tell you what happened. Flag makers were like, nah, they're going to admit those two Dakotas as one territory. They started making flags. And that didn't happen. So there's a few left in existence, but this is literally called the flag that never was. It happened 1890. We're going to admit 5 states: South Dakota, North Dakota, Montana, and Washington, all in November of 1889. We admit Idaho in July 3rd of 1890. You got to be in by July 3rd because the flag becomes official on July 4th. But which state came in first? Nobody knows. The 2 bills for North Dakota, South Dakota, they go on Benjamin Harrison's desk. He mixes up the paperwork. He is literally the only person that knows which state came in first. And so both states claim to be state number 39. This is 1892. Francis Bellamy going to come up with the first Pledge of Allegiance. There was, instructions on how to put your hand on your heart, salute the flag, and at some point it becomes permissible to do this. And after World War II, they're like, nope, 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 hand over the heart all the time. You are not giving what looks like the Nazi salute, right? Also, okay, 1909, this is a cool picture too. I don't think this is them, but I'm not 100% certain. I really couldn't find anything. This is Robert Perry and Matthew Henson placing the flag at the top of the North Pole, all right? All right, let's see, 1923, they're gonna make a small adjustment to the Pledge of Allegiance. And then in 54, Eisenhower, threat of communism, hey guys, Congress, let's put under God in there. Francis Bellamy's daughter was not appreciative. She didn't think it should have been altered, but there we go, it's still in there. All right, 1960, Alaska goes in 59, Hawaii in 1960, all right? Fort McHenry's my favorite flag. This is my second favorite flag. Right? That's one small step for man, one giant step for mankind. And why? Because I was born that day.
You were born that day.
I was born in the morning. They walked at night. The nurses sprinkled baby powder over me, called it moon dust, and then they made fun of my mommy for believing it was real and not a Hollywood movie set. So I see Ken laughing. So it's a great story because anyone at least 5 years older than me knows exactly where they were when that happened. Their mother got them out of bed. So yeah, that's my birthday.
Oh, how great.
This is 1976. I know a lot of you guys remember this. I remember this. This is the greatest save in baseball. It's not a pitching moment. This is when Rick Monday comes out of the outfield, scoops up the flag that's got lighter fluid on it from two Muslim extremists in the outfield. And I sent the link to Todd. We'll put it in the chat for you. There's a great interview with Rick about this on YouTube. I mean, it's really very emotional, even all these years later, for me to watch that. I'm a big baseball fan too, so that's one reason why. This is September 11th flag, right? Flag from the World Trade Center does survive coming down, and this becomes a symbol of sacrifice in service, loss, and determination. And what is that flag? That's going to be the flag and the stars laid out if we ever get a 51st state. All right. And my last slide, how did we get the nickname Old Glory? All right. Well, this is it right here. This is a 10 by 17 foot flag, and it was given to William Driver. He was a sea captain in Massachusetts, and his mother and a group of young female admirers, you go, Billy. They had sewn him this flag to celebrate him receiving command of his own ship at age 21 in 1824. And legend says that as he raised it on the mainmast, he said, "My ship, my country, and my flag, Old Glory." It survived multiple attempts to deface it during the Civil War because he flew it proudly from his home in Nashville, okay? And when the war was over, he was allowed to raise Old Glory over the Tennessee State House. It's now part of the Smithsonian's American History Collection, and it is second only to the Francis Scott Key Star Spangled Banner flag as a patriotic symbol, all right? We have the link about that as well. They're trying to restore it and all these other things, so we'll put those in the chat. But to close out, this is a great trivia question, and I never would have thought this. I learned this from a buddy of mine who used to be the head ranger at Fort McHenry. There are only 8 places where the United States flag flies by presidential proclamation, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. One of them is at Fort McHenry, the only national monument and historic shrine. The other is at the Flag House, where Mary Young Pickersgill sewed the flag. The other, the Marine Corps Memorial in Arlington, Virginia. It's on the Lexington Green, right? The shot heard around the world. The other, you got one in Pennsylvania, Valley Forge, by presidential proclamation. Flies at the White House. Of course, they give themselves one, right? Flies at the Washington Monument. And the 8th one is actually multiple ones by presidential proclamation at every single U.S. custom port of entry. And there you go, Flag Day.
Thank you, Mary. Wow, that was a tour and a half. That was an 1 hour lecture delivered in 20 minutes. Thank you.
Did I go 20? I'm sorry. I thought I cut it down.
No. That was perfect. What I'm saying is you managed to condense a lot of wonderful information. That was terrific. And we will do a quiz at the end.
Yes.
And,
I'm going to throw up the states with the stars, and you have to guess what state was added to the Union.
Exactly. Thank you.
So let me know
Thank
if
you.
anybody had any questions. I wasn't looking at the chat, so
Yeah, any questions here? Any questions here?
if I don't know it, I'll make up the answer. No?
Yeah, I
Okay.
love Flag Day is close to my, oh, Bob Young. Hello,
Okay.
Bob. Why don't you unmute, Bob? Bob, we can't hear you. Could you unmute?
The Iwo Jima flag, there's a couple of those. I thought maybe, did I miss that?
Yeah, the Marine Corps Memorial. Yeah, I called it by the official name just because that is what it's called. But you're right. Tour guides, we all just say, oh, we're going to Iwo Jima next. And sadly, one time I had an 8th grader that thought we were going to Iwo Jima from Arlington.
And speaking of which, speaking of Iwo Jima, tomorrow night we have Herschel Woody Williams on at 7 p.m.
Awesome.
right here for Greatest Generation Live, the only surviving Medal of Honor recipient from World War II. We're also going to have Bob Young here, Iwo Jima battle veteran. We'll have Jack Watson, Iwo Jima battle veteran, and Larry Kirby also. And Jay Galbraith, who's a relative of mine, is going to be here. His father served as a chaplain on Iwo Jima, and there's an iconic picture of him giving last rites to a Marine on the beach. We're going to have Jay talk about that. So please, tomorrow night, 7 o'clock, please do join us. That'll be a great program. Thank you so much, Mary. Flag Day is close to my heart. I think I mentioned before, my grandfather was my hero growing up. He came from a Polish immigrant and didn't know when his birthday was, and he chose Flag Day. He was
That's
the
awesome.
most patriotic person I've ever
Oh,
met. And
isn't that beautiful?
it just absolutely warms my heart. So we always celebrated my grandfather's birthday today.
Well, Todd, I had told you, but I was given that job at the Orioles because the person who was doing it for many years before me was very ill. And he went to our supervisor and said, Mary will care for that flag. That will mean something to her.
Oh,
Sadly, he died, I think, like a day before the day after opening day. And I mean, I toast a beer to him every opening day. I mean, not only to remember him, because his dying just killed me, but I literally thank him for really entrusting that to me. I mean, it is I feel like it's an awesome responsibility, and I feel so incredibly patriotic when you go to Fort McHenry and you watch the video, like I'm ready to, take up arms against the British again. You don't need to. And I just get very, very patriotic about it. It's very emotional. I
love it.
That's amazing.
I love it, Mary. Thank you so much. Oh man, this is so great. And I see Laura Goosen here, and I do know that Laura, you're a young mother, and so you have a little one. I want to make sure that you get, if you have to get going, you get going in a timely manner. But I really wanted you to join us because you are a West Point graduate, and I kind of wanted to ask you kind of what the Army means to you. I have 2 pictures of you. And can I start by asking, why did you want to go to the military academy at West Point?
Absolutely. Yeah. Hi, everyone. Thanks very much for the opportunity. It sounds kind of like a cheesy answer, but it's so true. I really wanted to do something totally different, and didn't want to go and experience just a normal college. I wanted to kind of challenge myself in all different ways, shapes, and forms. And what better way to do that than to go to West Point and also get to serve my country. So I was one of those really crazy go-getters. And it was the best decision I've ever made.
Why was it so great?
I mean,
I'll interrupt.
Really,
before you even answer, I'm just going to say this because I asked that because there have been a few West Point graduates I've met who've gone on and had Army careers, and they've said West Point was horrible.
Oh, really?
Just in terms of it's tough. It's tough to make it through.
Yeah, I mean, the joke is the best view of West Point is in your rear view mirror.
Yes.
On graduation day. So there were very trying days, and it was very difficult. And there were definite highs and lows. And yes, there were times that it just flat out stunk. Absolutely, but I wouldn't change it for the world. I mean, I don't know. Looking back, I made friends of a lifetime. I mean, you get to serve your country. It changed me in more ways than I could ever imagine. And I don't know. I feel like it's the gift that continues to keep on giving throughout my life. So I feel very, very grateful. And I don't know, if it was easy, then everyone would do it.
Bingo. Bingo.
So
Yeah. If it's hard, it's probably worth doing.
yeah.
Exactly. Now, how has West Point, you said it's a gift that keeps on giving, you know, even these many years later. How so? How did I imagine it kind of formed a certain character in you, maybe instilled certain habits in you that have paid off?
Yeah. I mean, uh, there's so many ways. I mean, I'm probably, you could get my husband in here, my kids, and tell you I'm very structured to this day. We follow a very tight schedule here. But, you know, from a business perspective, the leadership that and training that I received at West Point and also in the Army, you can't put a price tag on it. It's just, you can attend every leadership training class that you would like to, which are wonderful outside in the civilian world. You're not gonna touch what is provided at an academy and also out in the Army. So I mean, they say they break you down and build you back up as a leader of character. It's so true. I mean, I remember my mom saying, like, you've changed. I can tell that you've really, really changed. And so that's something that it gives me a different perspective on life. I, take on different challenges in a new and different way. I think of things, I think differently because of it. So, I feel like every day I could give you an example of something I draw on from that time.
Peter Thens asked, what year did you graduate?
2005.
2005.
I was the class of 9/11, and eerily we graduated 911 graduates. Which
Hey,
is
Todd, the reason I brought that up was I was at her graduation. I was running the MPs in the stadium.
no way. Oh
Yeah.
my gosh, what a small world.
Yeah. Can I share a quick graduation story with you?
Sure.
Okay, so the Catholic priest at the time was a Father Matt Pawlikowski. He eventually became the cadet chaplain, the Corps Cadets chaplain, and he was actually on the news when Army beat Navy for the first time in so many years. He was actually sitting there saying the rosary, and they did a story on him afterwards. But so Father Matt and I were pretty good friends, and we're watching the graduation. I'm making sure people are behaving. And we're standing up at the superintendent's box looking over, and it's about that time where they're going to say, class dismissed, all the hats go in the air and all that. So, just chaos is about to break loose. And he looks over at me and he goes, Sergeant Thens, that's a beautiful sight. He goes, 1,000 cadets about to graduate. I look back at him. I said, you know what I see, Father? He goes, what's that? It's 1,000 new lieutenants that I have to train.
Very true.
That's very good.
Those young, stupid lieutenants. Yep.
Now, Peter, you are military police at West Point. So that was, I think, one job that you had there. So you had to sometimes round up like wayward cadets who were off doing something they shouldn't have been doing. Did you ever round up a cadet Goosen that you can remember?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I remember, when a cop says they remember you, sometimes you have to go, why? But I will share my term of endearment that I do call anybody who graduated from West Point. I call them kid idiots because I was an MP. I knew what they were up to.
Yes.
So Peter, congratulations. You just insulted Laura twice.
No, I've heard it
about 60
all the time. I mean, I that is not the first time I've heard that. I mean, at the end of the day, we're young, stupid teenagers, right?
Yeah. Well, and that brings me to the question, Laura, how many years then do you owe the Army after West Point? Is it 4 or 6? 5. Okay. So you did 5 years. What did you do with those 5 years? Where did you go? What was your job?
I was a military intelligence officer. I was the 35 Delta, Fort Huachuca, Arizona, Fort Riley, Kansas were the two stations that I was at for.
that they don't sound really exciting places to be.
No, I did do a quick stint in Fort Richardson, Alaska, which was awesome. It wasn't long enough though. But yes, Fort Huachuca, Arizona is in the middle of nowhere. It has great Mexican food. But Fort Riley, Kansas, the Little Apple, not wonderful. It's not the Big Apple.
So Laura, I mean, would it be accurate to say that you were kind of fighting the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq from Arizona and Kansas?
Correct. I was never deployed.
But you were never deployed, but your work was
utilized. Correct. Over in Iraq and Afghanistan. That is correct. Yes.
Could you tell us a little bit about that work, or you can't at all?
I mean, I held some pretty high clearances. I can't say a whole lot on what's going on, but I mean, we essentially collected intelligence on really bad people, places, and things.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it was interesting, and I still think in that way to this day.
In what way? Tell us about that just a little bit.
I don't know. I probably think the worst, go to the worst case scenario, and then work my way backwards.
Got it.
Yeah.
Got it.
So probably to a fault.
Okay.
But you're trained that way. You kind of expect the worst to happen.
So you say you were the class of 9/11. That means your freshman year or your first year, you was the attack of 9/11. I mean, you're in your first weeks, right, of West Point.
Yes. So I was a plebe. So freshman, I remember going to I was getting additional instruction from one of my professors and walked in to his office, and he said, "You're never going to believe this. An airplane just flew into one of the Twin Towers." And I was like, "Oh, that's kind of crazy." And he was like, we're going to start doing some, protocols and things like that as far as to kind of secure West Point. So he's like, everyone needs to go back to their rooms. And then my roommate and I watched it on TV the second, and then things started happening. Alarms started going off. We had a soccer game. I played on the soccer team. We had a soccer game that afternoon, and things just started canceling. We couldn't get in. I couldn't call my parents. They couldn't get in touch with me. Things just started shutting down because I think they then didn't know really what was going to happen after that. We are very close, right? We're right down the river from New York City. So they didn't know whether West Point is kind of an easy target if you're around that area. So they didn't know whether we were up next or not. So it got real crazy real fast.
How did the tone or the kind of atmosphere on campus change after that? I would imagine there would be like at least a very deep, subtle change, a seriousness instilled.
Oh, absolutely. Peter could probably talk about it too. I mean, we were we weren't eating at the same time at the mess hall. We were on different schedules. They were trying to kind of change things up for us over the next few weeks. We couldn't leave. People couldn't come on post. From that point on, the inspections, getting on post just were ramped up to the next level. But those next few weeks were very intense. They deliberately kind of switched the schedules up to make sure that we were not all congregated at one certain time.
And hey, Todd, there's something unique about the West Point and Annapolis as well. Most veterans are going to recognize an acronym called MEVA, Mission Essential Vulnerable Area. Mm-hmm. And those always play a part when you're doing physical security and locking down a base and stuff like that. I was a physical security expert before I went to West Point. And when I went there, I was told that the Corps Cadets was a MEVA. And I looked at them like, the hell are you talking about? It's a group of people. There might be high value targets, but they're not. And the reason that is kind of weird is because anytime you have something called a MEVA, there's certain security requirements for it. So one of the things I had to do was anytime the cadets were in groups of 1,000 or more, we had to provide military police support to actually secure a perimeter. Like if they decided, and this happened a couple times when I was there, Army Navy basketball, not really a big deal, but one year it became a big deal. And I guess as a punishment, both the freshman and the freshman and sophomore classes were told they had to go to the game. Well, that's 2,000 cadets. So all of a sudden I'm jumping through my butt trying to get a platoon of MPs together because we have to secure the building and provide security for it. So it was just,
think about
it's
that.
something that's very unique.
Think about the human capital investment in those 1,000 cadets. They're being trained to lead the Army.
Well, in the news as well, because if just imagine the news, if something like that happened at West Point. Yeah. Oh, that's a cool picture.
Those kid idiots, they might be worth a little bit.
Laura, I love this picture. This is you and your grandfather.
Yes. This is like probably one of my favorite pictures ever. He is, you talked about your hero, Todd. He's my hero. I got my first salute, and just a super special day for me. I'll probably get emotional. He's just an amazing person. He was one of my inspirations to go. He was the only, everyone always said, did you come from a military family? I did not. He was a World War II veteran, went in on D-Day. He also military intelligence. And he was amazing. He passed about 3 months after I graduated. So, just super special that I was there. He was able to be there. He was wheeled on. He was in a wheelchair. He was wheeled onto the field in Mikey Stadium to see me graduate. And then he was able to stand up and perform our first salute. So it was a really special time.
Oh, could you imagine how proud he was?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, how great. I'm going to stop sharing here. Every once in a while, I'll lose my mouse. Steve, we don't want to see you, Steve. Okay, there we go. There you go. Thank you so much, Laura.
Absolutely. And thanks for the opportunity.
Do people have questions for Laura about West Point or her Army career or why she thinks the Army is so great?
Did you give your grandfather a silver dollar?
I sure did. He got it. Yes.
How terrific.
Yep.
I could just imagine his pride.
You might want to explain the first salute, Laura.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Jim.
Yes.
First salute. What is that?
Yeah. So when you get commissioned, you get to hand out your first salute, and you're able to choose what that is. That is, it's your first and only first. And you provide them, the tradition is to provide them a silver dollar for that. And he was mine. So
Jim Roberts, does that happen after OCS also?
Yes, we saluted our first sergeant. We were actually sworn in at 6 a.m. in a chapel before the formal ceremony. When we came out, the first sergeant from the OCS company was waiting for us. And so he took the salute and the silver dollar from each one of us.
That's a lot of silver dollars.
He had a big box. There were about 140 of us.
He earned those. He earned them, I'm sure. That's great. Any other comments or questions here for Laura? Laura, thank you so much. That is absolutely fascinating. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
I appreciate you joining us. And I want to go to a picture of Mark that he sent me, Spiradigliosi. Someday I'll say it in a real good Italian accent.
You did well with it.
You could tell Mark, he's the happiest man ever to be in the Army in this picture. Look how happy he is.
There was cattle prod involved with that.
So Mark, you said you were drafted. According to what I read, and I want to put a link here in the chat, you had a well-intentioned family member, maybe an uncle, who tried to convince you to join the Air Force, and you said no.
No, my brother,
Oh,
actually.
brother.
My family has a long history of serving. I had four brothers that served, and my father served during World War II. Now, my father served in the National Guard because he had four children at that point in life, and they sent him off to Fort Drum, New York, which I think still exists and things like that. But my brother Nick, who was two up from me, was an Air Force sergeant at the time. And he said, you need to join the Air Force and you need to do this. And, I was young and stupid. And well, now I'm old and stupid, but back then I was young and stupid. And I thought that I could actually avoid the draft. Now I am a kid that has no money, and there are 9 of us total in that family. There's no hope of college whatsoever or deferment for there. But I think that somehow I'm going to end up in Fort Richardson, Alaska, like Laura did. But I did not end up there. My brother was there while another brother was serving in, and I kid, but he was a scope dope in Fort Richardson on the DEW line. And he stayed in Vietnam because he was in the Air Force, and he was in Saigon at a secure base there. And my brother that was in Alaska didn't have to go. I ended up, he had rotated back, and they were at that point not allowing Air Force people to do it. So here I go, and I'm an 11B like an idiot. I'm an infantryman. So
You're 11 Bravo, which is the code for infantry.
Yes.
Right. And you did, and I mean, I remember years ago a veteran saying, after basic training in the 60s, if you were sent to Fort Polk, right? Fort Polk in Louisiana,
Yes.
you knew you were going to Vietnam almost immediately after you
There's
got
no
out.
about it, doubt it. To quote Bob Prince, when you went there, you just knew. I actually was drafted on October 24th, and I was in country, Vietnam, with a weapon on April 4th of 1968. So, I mean, I was that. If you read Edison 64, and the author talked about the fact that at 18 and a half, the selective service system said, you're gone. I was the quintessential you're gone. and I went, and and that was at the end of advanced infantry training in Fort Polk, which I finished up mid to late March of 68, and was in Vietnam 2 weeks later.
So you're done, you get maybe 2 weeks at home, and then you're off.
Right. And this is one of those vacation spots that I referred to earlier. If anybody's been to Fort Polk, they'll know what I mean.
Yes. Who else gets to be in the swamps of Louisiana? Did you feel you got good training there for what you were to encounter in Vietnam?
Todd, I was young and stupid. I mean that. I really was. I thought that I was going to take on the world, whether it was good, bad, or indifferent. Yeah, I learned that it was not the greatest. Whenever I got to on K, we went out to LZ Jack. The 1st Cavalry Division is where I ended up at. We were at Camp Evans to LZ Jack, and LZ Jack is where they had their green boot camp. And when I got there, I realized how poorly equipped I was to do that, and how bad the M16 was at that point, because it was newly introduced there. Yeah, there it is there. I spent more time cleaning that weapon than I did firing it to keep it operational.
And we've had a lot of conversation here about the M16, some pro, some against. And essentially what I've heard, of course, there are many improvements. Like, it was terrible at first, and it improved along the way. But the one thing that keeps on coming up is the people who love the M16, they say, oh yeah, but you had to keep it clean. If you didn't keep it clean, and keeping it clean meant like obsessively keeping it clean.
Every night, Tom, every night.
Yeah.
And sometimes during the day. And they had a flicker on the top of them that would unjam them pretty quickly in the case of a jam. And I used that quite frequently. to clear the weapon. But the thing that you didn't get taught at Fort Polk, Louisiana, was the fact that number one, I never qualified with an M16. I did with an M14 because I was qualifying with an M14. I finally got to fire one in Vietnam and be qualified with it as I got over there. They showed us all of the ins and outs with it, but they were not showing us how to use it in late 67, early 68 at Fort Polk.
What's all this stuff you have hanging off your back here?
Well, it's water, and you have to have your poncho liner with you. We had an air mattress at that point. I pity the guys that were in the 1st Infantry Division and in the 25th, because they didn't have we were air mobile, naturally, had helicopters, and the helicopters would take us in and out pretty much. We weren't humping. We were humping with that, but not a lot. And we rotated what the equipment was. We rotated the M60 amongst us. We rotated the PRC 25 radio amongst us, which I hated. That was because in addition to your paraphernalia and everything that you need to survive on your rucksack, and plus sea rations and everything that you need to survive is in there. And there's also 2 cans of beer somewhere buried deep down in that, I'm sure. We got to do it by helicopters. Those guys weren't quite as lucky. I mean, the big movements weren't as lucky as we were.
So you were 1st Cav, and that means that you would be, say, would you go back after patrols to on key?
Yeah, on K. Yes,
on K.
We would end, like, my first combat assault, Charlie Alpha, was into a little place called Ashaw Valley. And it was Operation Delaware. If you get a chance to go out and do any research on it, you can see it very quickly. Operation Delaware was basically going into Ashaw for the 2nd time in mass force, because of the valley floor had an airstrip down the center of it, and we were securing that airstrip and trying to cut off the NVA on the that would be the western side of the valley. The valley ran north-south about 20 miles. My first combat assault was on April 19th into the Ashaw Valley, and that was while it wasn't prime Tet, it was in the latter part of the Tet offensive there in Vietnam. And it was it was my first experience at battle. And we ended up going in through the northern end. We were 3rd Brigade, the northern end of the valley, and coming down in and securing that airstrip, and watched the C-130 get shot down over it. There's an interesting story by an author. If you want, I'll share it with you sometime, that talks about missing that plane that was shot down. He was a reporter out of Michigan, and missed that plane by 3 minutes, and said he would get on the 2nd plane out. And he was actually on that 2nd plane and saw where the 1st plane was burning and asked what that was. And they said it was the plane he was supposed to be on. So it was kind of the valley was probably the toughest battle that I endured, and it was the first.
And it was the first. Did you, after that battle, and I've asked so many veterans this kind of a question, after that battle, do you come back and think, I have to, I'm just beginning this tour. I've got 11 more months to go. How am I going to survive?
I thought that on April 4th, not April 9th. I mean, I didn't know, I was young, and I had some training, but I was ill prepared in my mind to be there. I can remember my mother saying to me as I was departing, and at that point out of Altoona, Pennsylvania, that this would be the last time she ever saw me. And
thanks, Mom. Thanks,
yeah,
Mom.
It rang so true. I, to this day, tear up when I think about that, and worry that I worried about that statement, just those few words, for a year.
When your mom tells you that,
yeah,
that's pretty bad.
Yeah, but that wasn't said in a mean and hateful way.
Right.
That was said in a, believe it or not, in a loving way.
Right. A mournful way. Right.
Yeah, that she didn't want to let go is what it
Yeah.
was. So,
What about your dad? What did your dad tell you?
well, my dad was military, and he said that, there's no, and his words ring true too. There's nobody going to take any better care of you, Mark, than you. And he said, you need to be, and my dad was an Italian philosopher, Todd, that would be, they come out with it. The one thing that rings in my ears every day is, boy, if you're going to be dumb, you got to be tough. But he told me that quite frequently. But
That's a good one.
But he said that if, you need to keep yourself down and protected. And he said, especially being an infantryman, he said, there's a lot of other things. And he said, if you could ever find your way out of the field, get out of it. So, but you had asked Laura a little bit. That's at LZ Evans. You asked Laura about what it taught her. 18 and a half is what I was. No particular place to go. I mean, I felt like a Little Richard song. I wasn't going anywhere in life. The year I spent there took me from that kid to who I am.
That fast. It really did.
Yeah. And you never know, and I think the wiser words taught by my dad were given to me when I returned, studying at a place called the Abruzzi Society. It's an Italian club in downtown Altoona, Pennsylvania. And I was not 21, so I could not vote, and I could not legally get a beer in the state of Pennsylvania. And the bartender, my dad was sitting there, and he said to the bartender, "Bring the boy a beer." And the bartender said, "Nick, he's not 21. He said, "If you don't give him a beer, I'm going to have to make you pay for it." He said differently. And we sat there over that beer. And the thing that he said to me is, you've got a choice to make. You have a way, you have a direction you need to be taking. You can sit back and you can blame everything that's bad that has happened to you in your life on this past year, or you can use it as a stepping stone. You can become a man, pull up your bootstraps and go forward. I chose the latter. Fortunately, ended up being a very, I like to think, successful. My wife is sitting here beside me. She could probably attest to that. That I became successful, and the reason I did that is because I spent a year in Vietnam learning how to be a man.
Oh boy, what a story. Here is your uniform. I'm sure it still fits.
Yeah, actually, Todd, it fits my wife.
Well, they shrink over the years. They tend to shrink.
Yeah, I was 120 pounds at the time. Linda's slightly less than that, so she put it on and buttoned it up. But my thought is I wanted to restore this back to what it was. I actually, whenever I left Vietnam, I thought to myself that I might want to make a career out of the military, only because it was that discipline that it taught me. And so, as you can see, I served with the 2nd Infantry Division in Korea for a while after I came back from Vietnam.
Yes.
And hence the Spec 5 instead of the sergeant stripe at that point, because my MOS changed from 11B to 7120 at that point. So,
and what was 7120?
It was mail clerk. I worked at an APO in Kimchi, Korea for a year after I had done all of that. So.
And I love this. So you see the first Cav patch on the right sleeve, the 2nd Infantry Division patch, the Indian Head Division patch on the left sleeve. You see the all-important combat infantry badge, which I'm sure is probably the most important thing on this on this jacket. And I should tell people that Mark was wounded. You did not serve out your full tour, correct? Because you were
right.
badly.
Well, I was wounded, came back, and then I was short when I came back from Camp Zama, Japan. They had picked shrapnel out of my left side because I always said that the Viet Cong that was on the far end of the column and shot at us was a bad shot because he overshot me, and I was on the end of the column by about, I'm going to guess about 40 or 50 feet. and I was peppered up and down the left side with shrapnel that they were able, it wasn't a life-threatening wound, but it was, they picked it all out, and I came back and ended up my short tour there. This I had put together by the U.S. Metals Association out in Oregon. I had done one of these on my own, and it wasn't near as nice and as professional as what they've done here. This has the Gary Owens crest in it, which historians know where Gary Owens, where that originated. Anybody? It was an Irish lilt that George Armstrong Custer used whenever he was charging in battle. In not only at the Little Bighorn, which everybody remembers George Armstrong Custer for, that's his worst day. His best day was at Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, when he kicked Jeb Stuart's rear end and changed the course of that war. So, but Gary Owens I was in A Company, 1st Battalion, 7th Cavalry, and the 7th Cavalry was that of the first commanding officer wasn't General George Armstrong Custer, it was Colonel, because after the Civil War, they lost all their generalships and he became an Indian fighter.
Right.
Not very proficient.
And here's the specialist rank that you were, the E5, right?
Yes,
here. No, these all no longer exist.
Right. Only spec 4s exist today, because I had a devil of a time trying to procure spec 5 stripes. They're hard to get now. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you so much. That is, does anybody have a comment? I know that so a specialist, I've always been confused about that, especially, earlier on from the 60s and even into the 70s, there were other specialist ranks. Now I think there's only one, as you said, a spec rank. What's the difference between a spec and
hard stripes? Hard stripes and specialists. Specialists are generally people that spend time, in my opinion, and I don't know how true all of this is, in clerical or administrative type jobs. Hard stripes are people that are out in the field doing the duty. I came out of Vietnam as a corporal, and then as I came back to the States, I changed MOS and became a spec 4 at that point, and then was promoted to spec 5.
So it's the same pay grade, but different rank.
Yes, absolutely.
Got it. Okay.
Todd, they do have the same equivalent nowadays. They don't call them, the spec 4, there's no longer a spec 4, it's a specialist. The SPC is the short term for it. But if you look at the E8 and the E9 ranks, you have a master sergeant and a first sergeant. A first sergeant is in charge of troops. A master sergeant is usually in an administrative role. Sergeant major and a command sergeant major, they're both E9s. Command sergeant major is in charge of troops. Sergeant major is usually in charge of a section, so like an admin type of.
Okay. Ray Brendel, what was your rank? You were Army. We see that in your background.
Yes, I was a spec 5.
Spec 5. Okay, spec
Right.
5. All right, that's because you had
I always heard the hard stripes could command troops, where the specialists could not.
Exactly. I heard that too.
Well, yes and no, because specialists reported to me. Spec 4s were under my command whenever I was in Korea.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Michael, you have your hand up.
I did. They covered it. The specialists theoretically did not command other troops except in the medical field. A spec 5 could talk with spec 4s and direct them, but he couldn't direct combat troops.
Okay. Okay. Very good. Yeah. All right. So somebody else, Deborah, you say spec is the natural progression of rank between PFC and sergeant. And every once in a while you'll hear the term, like you use them. I think you both said hard ranks, hard stripes.
Hard stripes.
Hard stripes. Okay. All right.
Hey, Todd, they've actually, I just read something, I think it was last week now. So E1 through E4, they're the junior enlisted. You can have an E4 who's a corporal. He has hard stripes.
Right.
Same rank E4 as a specialist E4, but the corporal is actually considered a non-commissioned officer. Okay. And they actually just made a new rule in the Army now that if you are a specialist who has been to the board, the promotion board, and you're going to be promoted to E5 at some point, they'll actually pin corporal rank on you now.
Okay.
So there's going to be even a bigger difference for the future Army now between a specialist and a corporal. Even though they're E4s, one's going to be looked at as more administrative and one's going to be looked at as a non-commissioned officer.
And is there a certain rivalry between them, or do corporals look down a little bit on this? You know, I'm trying to mix it up here.
Well, they call the specialist rank when I was in, they called it a sham shield. And here's why. Because if you're,
Just answer my question, Peter.
If you're a specialist and you got a bunch of PFCs and below running around and they say, hey, why aren't you helping us mop? Because I'm a specialist, I'm in charge here and I'm watching. But then when an NCO comes down and says, hey, why aren't you doing this? I'm a specialist. I'm not an NCO. I'm not in charge of anything. So the best of both worlds.
The best of both worlds. Oh, that's
for a
funny.
while.
And speaking of best of both worlds, Steve Bridian, you had the best of the Marine Corps and the Army National Guard, correct? Steve is with us. If you unmute, here you go. Hey, Steve.
Hey.
How are you?
I'm good.
You went from the Marine Corps to the Army National Guard, so I really wanted you to come on because you don't want to go the other way, do you?
It doesn't usually happen that way.
It doesn't usually happen that way. I would imagine. Well, let me ask you, what was it like for you to go from the Marines to the Army National Guard? Was it a culture shock for you? Was it a culture shock for them? They had to encounter this old Marine.
I think a little bit of both there. Coming from the Marine Corps, it's very regimented. As you know, I'm sure, a lot of history. They teach you a lot of history about the Marine and stuff like that. And when you first get to the National Guard, it seems a little more laid back. And you can, as a former Marine, you can come off as my wife's sitting here, so I hope she doesn't hear this, but a little bit of a hard ass.
Yeah.
But it was an easy transition because, I mean, you're going to treat your Marines or your soldiers the same.
Right.
If you treat them fairly and show them that you're a good leader, it doesn't matter what branch they are.
And how long were you in the Marine Corps?
9 years.
And you joined in the late 70s?
1974.
1974. And I love this picture of you on the left here, kind of by the roadside with a pile of cardboard around you. It looks like.
Well, I was scavenging through the leftover sea rats, that nobody wanted, because when you've been out humping for days at a time, one sea rat doesn't quite do it sometimes. So I'm trying to find a little bit extra chow.
And so you got out of the Marine Corps when?
In 1987.
87, and then joined the Army National Guard.
Right away, yes.
Right away. And you're one of how many years did you put in altogether?
34 altogether.
34 years. Oh my gosh, that's devoting your life.
Yeah, well, I enjoyed it all. I'll have to say that.
You did enjoy it all.
Yes.
And we've had you on before talking about, life in a military family. And after 9/11, of course, you get activated, deployed, sent to Iraq, get wounded, sent to Afghanistan also. And you, like Bob Mizwa here, you were older in Iraq, right?
I turned 50 in Iraq, yeah. And I was 55 in Afghanistan.
55 in Afghanistan, kind of being in charge or taking care of 20-year-olds, I imagine.
Yeah. Yeah. Old
I
enough
mean-
to be my son.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, younger than your sons even. And you had to, I mean, you had to keep them safe.
Yeah, you tried to, yeah.
What do you think is the big difference between the Marine Corps and, say, the Army National Guard?
Well, I came up with a whole list of stuff. But in the interest of time, I'll just hit some of the high points.
Yeah, hit some high points.
Well, I think in the Marine Corps, they have a lot of heritage that they pass on right out of boot camp, in boot camp. And there's a culture around the Marine Corps. And there's only 2 boot camps. So in the Marine Corps, as you pointed out earlier, is like the smallest branch. So it's a shared, the same experience is shared by everybody, no matter if you went to Parris Island or San Diego. In the Army, there's many different boot camps, and the boot camps, I believe, are mainly geared towards what field, infantry guys go to this boot camp and other people go to different boot camps. So their boot camp experience is different. Some are, maybe combat arms ones are a little bit more, harder than other ones and things like that. So, I mean, I think that's a big difference. And there's I think the Army made a big mistake back in the 60s when they went away from the regimental system, and they developed the battle groups for the nuclear battlefield, and then that transitioned into these anomalous brigades, which it's like a modular thing in the Army. So you lose a lot of your heritage that the Marine Corps keeps, because it's the regimental system throughout, because it was just regiments, Marine regiments, until World War II. That was when they had the first divisions, was when World War II started. And so now, like in the 28th Division here, they have 3 brigades, but the 110th Infantry Regiment, which I was in, had a storied history in World War I and in World War II. And now that there's just 1 battalion of that regiment that's active now. And so I think they've lost a lot.
That is so interesting, Steve. And we've never talked about that here in the Veterans Breakfast Club. And I think we should, because people like me get very confused about, what happened to the 2nd Infantry Division? What happened to the 1st Cavalry Division? And you mentioned the Army has done this brigade thing where you create brigades that are modular, meaning you could mix them and match them and split them up and get, assign them to different groups. And there, you don't have that sense of continuous heritage over
Right.
time.
And that's important. I mean, you as a young soldier, you take pride in your unit, and if you have pride that goes back for decades, like in the Marines, you don't get that anymore in the Army. I don't feel.
Interesting. What else is on your hit list here?
Well, let's see. I think in the Marine Corps they start leadership a lot sooner. Like in boot camp, you learn the 11 principles and 13 traits. And in the Marine Corps, junior NCOs have more authority. In fact, in the responsibility, like squad leader in the Marine Corps is usually a sergeant in E5, and in the Army, it's a staff sergeant E6. And so it's like 1 level lower in the Marine Corps is the leadership down there, and they push that down a little bit farther. So that's one big difference. Marksmanship, I felt, was always a high priority in the Marine Corps, because in boot camp you spend 1 week of dry firing to learn how to do it right, and then you spend a week on the range shooting, to learn. So you learn where your bullet's going to go when you're aiming at something. And the Army, I think they're slowly changing now. They have a new marksmanship program to like kind of correct some of these deficiencies, but that was always like something that stuck in my craw. I always thought well, Marines are always are better shooters, I believe.
So Mark, here, Steve, here you are on the Army birthday, and so far, Marines 3, Army 0.
Well, no, it'll even out here eventually. Yeah, I'll do a good one for the Army here. I think in the Marine Corps, you have a higher percentage of first-time enlistees. So you have a lot of younger guys. In the National Guard, you have a high percentage of prior service people that, like me, get out for one reason or another, but they want to maintain that who they are,
Yes.
But so you have a high percentage of prior service people that bring a lot of experience to that unit, and they have civilian jobs. Then they bring that civilian experience to their unit, and they're more mature. They more families and stuff like that because they're typically a little bit older. So it's like the maturity level, the age level is a little bit higher, I believe, in the National Guard than on active duty.
We'll give the Army that. Oh, yes, absolutely. Definitely.
So, I mean, and the active duty, and I did when I was on active duty, you kind of look down on the National Guard. But after being in it, I realized that it doesn't matter if you're active duty or National Guard, a unit functions as well as the leadership. You can have a poorly trained active duty unit, and you can have a very highly trained National Guard unit. It all depends on the leaders and what direction they take. But then that being said, in the National Guard, when we did deploy, had a shortage in the MTO, that the table of organization equipment, how many people you're authorized and how much equipment and of what type you're authorized. We're always short personnel in the National Guard. And when we had to deploy, every time we deployed, the unit, there was never at full strength. You had to take people from other units around to bring us up to strength to go. But we're pretty flexible. And so everybody just assimilates, and we always get the job done.
And let's see, do you have one? Do you have it? Were you going to say something, Mary? Did you have a question? No. Okay. Let's give us one more difference.
Okay. Well, the equipment. When I was in the Marines in 1974, we were always the last ones to get something, and we always joked that it was the stuff that the Army didn't want anymore. And then when I got to the National Guard in 2005, before we deployed, we were still using M60 machine guns, Prick 77 radios, and we had PVS 5s, the night vision. And the active duty Army had the 240 Bravo machine gun and the Prick 119 Singars and everything else. And we didn't get that stuff until we mobilized and got down there. And then they're giving you all this stuff, that you have to learn how to utilize. And one last thing, uniforms. The Army can't decide what uniform they want to wear, whether it's camouflage or dress uniform. At least the Marine Corps sticks with something that works.
That's great. Steve, thank you so much. Thank you for joining us and leading us through that. Would you mind emailing that if you have the email, if you could do it? I'd love to receive that and maybe post it and give you credit for it. I think that's a really interesting list there that you have.
I'll kind of tidy it up because I kind of wrote it in shorthand. So but yeah, I'll send something to you.
Yeah, just take a picture of it, send it to me. That's Mark, what were you going to say?
Well, just one more. I can give one up to the Army versus the Marines. If you're in the Army, there is a better chance of becoming president of the United States than if you're in the Marine Corps. There were 16 American Army presidents and 0 Marines. So there's one.
Okay, well, I'm not sure if that's a checking the Army column or the Marine column there, Mark. Before we go on, I have one more veteran I absolutely want to get to. I want you to hear his story. And I know that it's, almost 4 to 9, but I want to remind you before we go on that we have a special event tomorrow night. Obviously, Woody Williams with the Marine Iwo Jima veteran. He's going to join us at 7. And we also have a new event that we've put on the schedule. This is an evening with Francis Gary Powers Jr. Some of you, if you're older than 70 years old, I think you'll absolutely remember who Francis Gary Powers was. He was the U-2 spy pilot, shot down over the Soviet Union in 1960, held as prisoner for 2 years. His story of his release is told in the Steven Spielberg movie Bridge of Spies. Francis Gary Powers Jr. is his son and was consulted on that movie, has written 2 wonderful books about his father, and also is the founder of the Cold War Museum in Virginia, in Northern Virginia. This is going to be a closed event, a Zoom event. You do have to register for it. Please do register if you can. I am looking for sponsors for this event. If you know of a company that might want to sponsor it, please do let me know and I'll contact them, and I'll make that pitch for all our events, for our Scuttlebutt podcast, for our live programs. These events come with sponsorships, that we're able to do this kind of programming through, number 1, donations, number 2, sponsorships, and number 3, grants. And we need to have all 3 of those streams being active to keep up our level of programming, especially now as we look forward to going back to in-person events. And we have to make decisions about how many online events to do, how many in-person events to do. We would love to do in-person events in places other than Pittsburgh. So all these things are coming up this summer. And it just reminds me of how some of our decisions are going to be geared toward whether we could get sponsors for them, whether we could get some kind of revenue from them. So if you know of potential sponsors, please do let us know. And certainly, of course, if you could donate, you can go to our website and click the support button and donate to support the kind of programming we do. We also have another event coming up at the end of next month. And I want you to mark it on your calendar. This is on Tuesday, July 27th at 7 p.m. It's with Marta Cohen. She was a spy for the French resistance and then the French army in World War II. She's 99 years old, very spry. I've been emailing back and forth with her from her home in California. She does travel the world. She did before COVID, giving talks about her experiences. And she's going to talk with us about how in 1942, 1943, she's a French girl living in France. Germany invaded and deported much of her family to Auschwitz. She posed as a German nurse, crossed the border into Germany, and served as a spy for the French resistance and French army. And it's absolutely fascinating story. She's really a hoot too when she tells her story. We are going to screen a documentary about her and then have her on to answer questions, do a Q&A after. That's going to be Tuesday, July 27th. This is going to be another closed Zoom only event. You have to register for it. I think we could get the registration should be up on our website fairly soon if it isn't already. I know Ellie will put it up there. So mark your calendar if you can. But I want to introduce now Harry Van Riper. Thank you so much for joining us. Looks like you're in an Army tent, Harry.
No, not really.
Well,
That's
I mean,
the drapes from my dining room.
Oh, okay, good. You have good olive drab drapes. That's good. I'm glad for.
I think it's the lighting. They're not.
This is Harry. This is what he looked like 53 years ago, right, Harry?
Yes, sir.
Man, and you also have good things to say. What Mark Spriglidosi said reminds me of what I think you would probably say about the Army, that it gave you direction.
It was one of the best things that ever happened to me.
Why?
Well, I was a badass. My stepfather was an alcoholic, dysfunctional family, and hit the Army, and I was going to be a badass there. And all of a sudden, I heard a DI tell a guy that he's been hustling and he's going to make him a squad leader, and he's not going to have to do this, that, or the other. And I said, I turned 180 degrees at that point. I hustled. I was a squad leader all through training. And I lost it the last day because some guy was walking up the back of my boots. They had a mixed bunch of companies together. And this guy kept walking up the back of my boots, and I turned around, gave him a horizontal butt stroke, and he went flip, flip, flip. And my DI came to me and said, I have to bust you. You did it in front of everybody. But it really was. I mean, I hit the driver before me. We were mechanized infantry, lost 2 arms and a leg. And we were going into the third campaign of Tet, which we were the third campaign. We ran into a reinforced regiment of fresh NVA. And I think you remember me saying when you first interviewed me that I never saw so many RPGs in my life in this whole thing. Well, that paperwork I gave you for our presidential unit citation,
yes,
it talked about how they had developed squads of RPG men to try to deal with our tracks. I mean, they were just bouncing everywhere. But I couldn't. I went to track school. I was a mechanic, and somehow I ended up track school after Tigerland, and that I guess got me into driving because I guess they saw I was 1110. BU, I think it was for track driver. And so they knew I had that training, and I volunteered for it because I in the middle of what we were in, it was just horrific. I didn't want to be riding around on a track with somebody learning how to drive it.
And a track was an APC, an armored personnel carrier?
APC, yes.
And here you are above the hatch of an armored personnel carrier. And
somehow I climbed out of that track after the RPG hit me. My arm was dangling. My left leg was almost blown off. I was blind. I couldn't see because of the explosion. And I got out of that track because I thought if I didn't get out of that track, they wouldn't know I was alive. And I hit the ground, and they finally got to me. And I heard my platoon leader say, if you don't land that effing chopper, I'm going to shoot you down. And they finally did. My tracks in the pictures there on the far left. This is after they fought back to past where I was.
This is where your track was. This is where you were hit.
Yeah, right there. Yes, yes.
Right
but
there.
I was in the elephant grass. You couldn't even see me in some of those pictures. Some guy came up to me about 2-3 years ago, and from the other company that came up to support us, and he said, "These are pictures of you guys when you got hit." I was the first track to get hit in that action. We wiped out in 30 days that reinforced regiment. There were over 6,000 men. We were a battalion, and we were a pretty depleted battalion. We got a presidential unit citation for it. I didn't know any of this stuff till I came back. I mean, the guy on the ground, the squads that I learned about, I shared with you the paperwork for that. That was a lot of the paperwork for our presidential unit citation.
And you know, I think it's so interesting, Harry, that means so much to you. I mean, you lost your left arm and almost your life on this day, August 19th, 1968, 53 years ago, coming up this summer. And I mean, you're traumatically wounded, almost killed. You have to rehabilitate, get on with your life. And it's like, you kind of wanted to, I find it so interesting that you never quite knew how that story ended back in Vietnam. I mean, you were evac'd, but your buddies still, you know, they had to complete that battle. And I think it was so interesting for me to hear how much it meant to you that your unit got a presidential citation for that battle.
They say it's rare for a unit that large to get one. Yeah. I mean, 30 days we wiped them out, and we lost quite a lot of them. Lost a lot of guys. We had our only MIA. They got to Vietnam in '66, and we had our only MIA. I have a MIA flag up for him in my front yard.
In that battle?
Yeah. No, 2 days after I was hit.
2 days after you were
Ben Cooey. Well, we were in the Ben Cooey rubber plantation.
I love this picture. This is you in the hospital recovering. Again, your left arm was severed at the shoulder, and you barely made it. And here you are looking fairly happy.
I was alive.
You were alive.
I was alive. No, the social worker at Valley Forge said, you're supposed to be depressed. I said, I'm alive. I had a 15% chance of living after they operated on me. My lung was collapsed. My leg was almost shot off. My arm was gone. I mean, it was dangling. And I was out 8 days. They hit an ammo dump close to the hospital, and all the explosions woke me up. They said I popped up. I tried to run. I didn't know my leg was shot. And I hit the floor, but that woke me up.
And after that, after waking up, what was your first thought and second thought?
I'm alive.
It truly was. You're alive.
Yeah, no, really. I mean, they didn't even do my collapsed lung until after. They didn't think I was going to wake up. I think that I call that God's alarm clock. I mean, I'm a chaplain now for the American Legion, so I talk about that a lot. When I got out, the guy's looking at my records and he's going, "Holy cow, I can't believe you're here." And he turned the page and holy shit, and holy bad, a lot of bad words. But anyway,
Yeah.
he said, "It must be will to live." I said, "No, I just pointed up." I had a very strong faith. I never worried about it. I love being a chaplain. I actually got chaplain of PA for the 100th year.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. 2 years ago. Harry, you said, and I want people to know that you became a biology professor and a biologist and a researcher. And I loved it. I think when we first met, you said something like that losing your arm, and people, this is why Harry's such a hero to me, that you said losing your left arm made you a better biologist.
Oh yeah, there's no doubt. I thought everything through. I was done with things that were pretty critical labs in graduate school, and I was first one done because I knew it inside out, backwards and forward. I had to do things differently. So I had to really think. It made me think things through much more thoroughly.
So you have to think about, like, I mean, you did force me to think about not having an arm, and it takes thought to think, how am I going to get through that door? How am I going to carry this in and open that door? You know, so things like that, you're always forced to think through a world not made for people with one arm.
I have to tell you a story. I got my COVID shot. And the nurse came up to me and she had a mask on. I didn't recognize her. She said, "I'm a nurse now because you got me through nursing chemistry." She had failed it twice. And then the timekeeper was my microbiology student. So I've run into him everywhere. We turned out a lot of nurses, CCAC.
Yes, I learned a while ago when I was teaching college always to be nice to the nursing students, because you never quite know when you're going to run into them again.
When my appendix blew, the girl wheeling me out was a student, and the unit director, when I got to the unit, was one of my students. I mean, they're everywhere.
That's so.
And you know what? Nurses work so hard. I mean, they cry, they complain a little bit, but they have a goal. And a lot of the students that don't have goals, they just love, they whined a little bit here and there, but they all worked hard, and I got them through. I really enjoyed that. 34 years worth.
Does anybody have any questions for Harry or any of our other veterans, or hey, Bob Miswa, Mr. Viral on TikTok.
He's muted.
He's getting there.
Hey, I had a question for Harry. Hey, do you know if your unit later on start putting the chain link fence sections, about 12 inches off to the right and left of the flanks of your APCs later?
Oh yeah, when we had the PSP
RPGs. Because I tell you what, when we went down at Laotian border out there in Lao Bao, first or something, they got their butts kicked because they're down there in Sheridans and APCs. And those RPGs turned a couple of them into just puddles of aluminum.
Yeah.
And down where that M48 tanks, and it was a totally different story. They bounced off most of our turrets and slopes and that.
They put the PSP, the airport runway stuff that they put together. We hung double layers of those on both sides, so that it would trigger the RPG to go off before it hit the track.
Yeah. Now, when you got hit, did you have it on a track, or not? Did not?
Did I what?
When you got hit with that RPG, did you have that PSP on the sides?
I don't think so. I don't think so. Yeah.
So here's a picture of what you're saying. I think this is rolled up chain link fence.
Yeah, ours was on the side. It was the PSP, the stuff they made temporary runways out of. They interlocked.
Okay,
And
that
they had
rolled up
holes.
stuff. That rolled up stuff is when you go in your night defensive position, you'd put it
Right,
out in
for
front
your
of you.
perimeter. Yeah.
So if they shot an RPG at you, it would pre-detonate before it struck the armored vehicle.
Right, right. Yeah. I mean, I lost my whole arm. I don't know how I got out of there. My leg was shot. I don't.
Yeah, our first sergeant was in APC. We went down Laotian border. He got really severe. I mean, he lost like his left eye, I think his left arm, and part of his left leg from an RPG. You know, the rest of us were in M48 tanks, and oh God, I took 3 hits from RPGs. None of them penetrated. They glanced off. Well, 2 hits, and third one come by my ear.
Mine was an RPG-7.
Yeah, they shot all RPG-7s at us.
Yeah, but I had my hand on the control to reverse. And I looked in my periscopes and all the other tracks had backed up and our guys were pinned down in front of us. And I just couldn't make myself back up because our 50 caliber, my platoon leader came back about 2 months later and he said, if I'd have backed up, they'd have been run over. So that's why I have a right arm though. It would have been in the same plane as the other arm. I'd have lost both like the previous driver.
Wow.
Yeah.
Harry, Larry, I'm still looking. I'm still
there
trying.
you are.
I still have it.
God bless you, man.
Someday we'll find her.
Yeah. Good to see you.
Yeah, I've done some searching for her also. Here's a picture. We know that her name is B. Flythe, American Red Cross. She was a donut dolly at Watson Army Hospital in 1968.
Yeah.
And I know
Crazy stuff. Do you see the bandage around my chest?
Yes.
That's because there's nothing on the other side. I couldn't walk at that point because my leg was still shot up. I was in Valley Forge 8 months.
8 months?
Yep. And I wanted to get the hell out of there. They wanted to do something experimental and add bone to my arm because they attached all the muscles. I could still move it, but there's like 2 inches of bone left and they wanted to put more on there so that I could get a prosthesis that you can move around. And I said, no, I just want out of here.
Really? Like,
Yeah.
Get me out of here. Let me
Let
go
me
on
out
with
of
my
here.
life.
Yeah, I want to go on.
Can I ask you, I know it's late, it's 1 minute to 9 o'clock, but when you came home from Vietnam, you come home minus one arm, otherwise damaged otherwise. Did people avoid you? Did they ask you about it? I mean, you're pretty conspicuous walking around. You're a young man missing an arm. I guess people figured you must have lost it in Vietnam. Do you have any sense of how did your interactions with people change?
Well, we didn't really talk about it a whole lot because people weren't real pleased with us. My uniform went out on the curb. I didn't come through an airport. I came back on a litter. But I mean, I've heard stories of people getting spit on, and
right.
We weren't very popular. I mean, when I was in college, I talked about it. Some of the profs wanted to know.
Yeah.
Well, and I did things with one arm, and then they were amazed at how I did it because I had to figure out. I was offered a free ride to the University of Buffalo Medical School, and that would have been the following fall. This was spring, and somebody quit 2 weeks into the semester at CCAC, and a friend called me up and said, "Can you help us out?" And I fell in love with teaching.
Yeah,
so that was a god door as far as I'm concerned.
Right.
I dearly love teaching.
That's it. That's it. And teaching is not for everybody, but if you love it, that's what
I
you
loved
do.
it. I had an algebra student say that I could teach her dog algebra on ratemyprofessor.com. Yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed it. I know that God opened that door for me.
Well, I've thoroughly enjoyed talking with you, Harry. Thank you for joining us tonight. Thank you, Mary Klepper. Thank you, Mark and Steve Bridian, and to all our Army events contributing tonight. I really appreciate it. Thank you to Ellie and Sean Hall, who I didn't even introduce because I wanted to get right in. Peter Thens, I wanted to jump in right into things. I hope to see many of you tomorrow night for our program with Woody Williams, the Medal of Honor recipient from World War II. Man, this is a 2-hour celebration of the flag and the Army. I appreciate you all hanging with me. All right. Have a good night, everybody.